The mysterious arrival. The night sky over Earth was calm, sprinkled with countless stars as humanity had always known it. But on this particular night, telescopes around the world picked up something unusual. A massive fleet of alien ships emerging from the void of space, just beyond the edge of the solar system. The alien crafts were enormous, shimmering with an eerie blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Scientists and astronomers worked through the night, their faces pale with a mix of fear and awe. This was not a random discovery. It was a direct arrival. The alien fleet, later identified as belonging to the Kelvar species, sent out a bold and chilling message. It was a broadcast, not just to Earth's leaders, but to anyone with a device capable of receiving transmissions. The message played in cold, precise English, clearly learned from intercepted signals. We are the Kelvar. We come not to conquer but to pass. Your species and your planet are irrelevant. Do not interfere with our passage, or you will face the consequences. The message sparked chaos across Earth. News outlets covered the story nonstop. Was this the moment humanity had long feared? Would aliens attack Earth, or was this some misunderstanding? But the tone of the Kelvar's message left little doubt. They were not here to negotiate or respect human boundaries. World leaders quickly gathered for an emergency summit. The United Nations, military leaders, and scientists pooled their knowledge. Despite their differences, humanity was united in one thing. Earth was not a door for anyone to walk through uninvited. Messages were sent back to the Kelvar, warning them that their path crossed through protected space. Any incursion would be seen as an act of aggression. The Kelvar's response was swift and dismissive. Your warnings are meaningless. Primitive beings should know their place. We shall proceed. This reply fueled a mixture of fear and determination across Earth. Ordinary people looked to the skies, wondering if they would witness the end of the world. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Earth's most brilliant minds worked tirelessly. Unbeknownst to the Kelvar, humanity had been preparing for moments like this. Decades of research, countless resources, and a unified effort had created something extraordinary. An advanced planetary defense system called Titan Shield. Titan Shield was the brainchild of Dr. Ilara Grant, a young but exceptionally gifted scientist. She had dedicated her life to ensuring humanity could protect itself from any extraterrestrial threat. But even with Titan Shield, Earth's chances against such a large and advanced fleet seemed slim. Dr. Grant knew that humanity had one key advantage. The Kelvar underestimated them. As the alien fleet grew closer, Earth's space agencies monitored their every move. The Kelvar's ships were elegant and deadly, brimming with weapons far beyond human understanding. Yet their arrogance left gaps in their tactics. They didn't even bother to disguise their movements or shield their communications. It was as if they believed Earth was a helpless prey, not even worth the effort of strategy. The tension on Earth was palpable. Families huddled together in front of televisions, watching updates. The world's most powerful nations mobilized their militaries, but everyone knew that conventional weapons would be useless against a fleet of this magnitude. Everything depended on Titan Shield. Dr. Ilara, standing in the command center deep beneath Earth's surface, watched the live feeds of the approaching fleet. Her heart raced, but her voice remained steady as she addressed the team. They think we're weak. That's their mistake. We warned them. If they don't turn back, we'll show them what humanity is capable of. The Kelvar ships continued their steady advance, their formation tight and unyielding. On their flagship, the alien commander observed the unfolding situation with disinterest. To him, humans were just another primitive species clinging to an insignificant planet. Why do they resist? The commander mused. Do they not understand their place in the galaxy? But Earth's response wasn't what the Kelvar expected. A final warning was broadcast, this time from the leaders of Earth's most powerful nations. It was clear, direct, and filled with resolve. Turn back now, or face the consequences. This is your last chance. The Kelvar fleet ignored the message, their ships crossing the invisible boundary of Earth's claimed space. They saw no reason to fear. But far below on Earth, the activation sequence for Titan Shield began. In that moment, humanity's survival instincts, ingenuity, and defiance came together in a single purpose. As the Kelvar fleet edged closer, the people of Earth held their breath. Was this the end? Or would this night mark the beginning of a new chapter in human history? A chapter where humanity proved that it was not to be underestimated. The first moves had been made. The game had begun. The world waited, gripped by fear and hope, as humanity prepared to stand against an alien force that thought Earth was just another stepping stone in their path. Humanity's hidden power. The Kelvar fleet drifted closer, like a gathering storm that ignored the warnings of distant thunder. Their ships were vast, sleek, and intimidating, moving with the confidence of a species that had never been challenged. Across Earth, the tension was thick enough to feel in the air. Cities dimmed their lights as a symbolic gesture, as if dimming the sky might somehow shield them from the inevitable. But beneath the fear, there was something else, a quiet certainty that humanity had not revealed all its cards. Deep beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, hidden miles below in a classified facility, Dr. Ilara Grant stood at the heart of humanity's greatest secret, Titan Shield. Titan Shield wasn't just a weapon. It was a defense network that stretched across Earth and into orbit. Massive satellite arrays, hidden ground cannons, and pulse field generators were linked through a central AI system, Aegis. Every piece had been designed for one purpose: to ensure that no threat, no matter how advanced, could breach Earth's skies. Ilara's gaze flickered across the holographic display, which projected a real-time view of the Kelvar fleet. Their approach was methodical, deliberate. She traced the movement of each ship with careful eyes, noticing patterns and gaps. The Kelvar, for all their superiority, were predictable. A technician beside her, Marcus, shifted nervously. "They're still ignoring our transmissions," he muttered. "They really don't think we can stop them." Ilara's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "That's their first mistake." Marcus looked doubtful. "You think Titan Shield is ready for this?" Ilara didn't answer immediately. Her mind drifted back to the early days of Titan Shield's development, a time when humanity had barely survived another alien threat, the Revari. The Kelvar hadn't been the first to underestimate Earth, and if Ilara had anything to say about it, they wouldn't be the last. "We didn't build Titan Shield to scare them," she finally said. "We built it because we knew this day would come." Flashback, 5 years earlier. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and ozone. Ilara stood at the edge of a devastated battlefield, one that hadn't taken place on Earth, but on one of the colony moons orbiting Jupiter. The Revari had come without warning, believing humanity's expansion into space was premature. They thought they could wipe out the colonies and send a message. They were wrong. Ilara had been there, spearheading the counteroffensive. The technology Earth had then was crude compared to Titan Shield, but it was enough. Enough to repel the Revari and send them limping back into deep space. That battle had cost Earth dearly, but it had also set something in motion. Ilara remembered the words she'd spoken to the Council after that battle. "They will come again. And next time, we'll be ready." Back to present. Titan Shield hummed softly beneath the facility, its systems running endless diagnostics as the Kelvar fleet crossed further into the solar system. They were still days away from Earth, but Ilara knew that battles weren't won in the moment. They were won in preparation. The command room was filled with the quiet murmurs of technicians. Satellite feeds flickered on massive screens, showing images of the alien ships. Some civilians had taken to calling them the Reapers due to their sharp, scythe-like design. Ilara ignored the dramatics. Suddenly, a sharp beep filled the room. Marcus's eyes widened as he leaned closer to his screen. "One of their ships just destroyed a lunar relay," he said, voice tense. "No casualties, but it's a message." Ilara's jaw tightened. The Kelvar were probing, testing humanity's patience. "Do not engage," she ordered calmly. "Let them think they're in control." Marcus hesitated. If we don't respond, they'll think we're weak. Let them. Ilara knew exactly how this would play out. She had seen it before, species that believed strength was measured by the first shot fired. But Earth's strength lay in restraint, in knowing when to hold and when to strike. Still, she could feel the weight pressing down on her shoulders. Titan's shield was powerful, but it had never been tested against an armada of this size. If something went wrong, humanity wouldn't get a second chance. The meeting of nations. Meanwhile, far above, Earth's leaders gathered virtually in a secure communications room. Holograms of generals, presidents, and prime ministers flickered to life, forming a circle around Ilara's projection. "We can't sit by while they dismantle our infrastructure," one general snapped. "I say we fire first." "No," Ilara replied firmly. "Firing now will provoke them. Titan's shield is ready, but if we act recklessly, we might not survive the full force of their retaliation." An older ambassador leaned forward. "Dr. Grant, do you believe they'll continue ignoring us until the last moment?" "Yes," Ilara said without hesitation. "The Kelvar belief power only exists when it's displayed. They're pushing to see how far they can go before we react. And when that moment comes," the ambassador pressed. Ilara's eyes narrowed. "Then we remind them that Earth is not a stepping stone." The room fell silent. There was nothing more to say. Later that night, Ilara stood alone, gazing at Earth through the reinforced glass of the facility. The planet spun slowly beneath her, beautiful and fragile in the vastness of space. She had dedicated her life to protecting it. As the Kelvar fleet drifted closer, she made a silent promise. "Let them come. Let them think we're nothing but dust. When the time is right, we'll show them that humanity is far from defenseless." The first strike. The stars shimmered cold and distant as the Kelvar fleet continued its slow, deliberate march toward Earth. To them, this was not war. It was merely a display of dominance, a reminder to the younger races that the galaxy belonged to those who held power, and power, in the Kelvar's eyes, meant never needing permission. On board the Kelvar flagship, Commander Varric observed Earth through the glass of his command deck. His 4 black eyes, unblinking and analytical, scanned the blue and green world below. Primitive, unrefined. The humans had barely scratched the surface of their own potential, yet they dared to issue warnings. Varric's second-in-command approached, his heavy footsteps echoing softly. "The humans have issued another warning. They request we leave their space immediately." Varric didn't bother to look away from the viewport. "And we've disregarded it, as instructed." "But," the officer hesitated. Varric's gaze shifted slightly. "Speak your mind." "There is unease among some of the crew. The humans' confidence, it feels unusual. They are not like other species we have passed through." Varric's expression darkened, but he waved his officer away. "Confidence is often the last defense of the weak. Let them have their warnings. We continue forward." The Kelvar fleet pressed on, and with every passing hour, the distance between them and Earth grew smaller. Meanwhile, in Earth's lunar command center, far beneath the surface of the moon, humanity watched the Kelvar's approach with silent intensity. In a sprawling underground bunker carved into lunar rock, Dr. Ilara Grant and her team monitored every ship, every shift in formation. Titan's shield was ready, but no one had given the order to strike. Ilara stood at the center of it all, surrounded by glowing screens and holographic projections of the alien fleet. Marcus, her closest technician, leaned forward, his eyes locked on the data streaming in. "They've crossed the outer perimeter," Marcus said, tension in his voice. "One of their ships is nearing the satellite grid." "Hold fire," Ilara responded immediately. Marcus shot her a look. "If they destroy another relay." "They won't," Ilara interrupted calmly. "Not yet. They want to make us nervous. If we act rashly, we play into their hands." As if on cue, One of the Kelvar destroyers drifted closer to a communications satellite orbiting just beyond the moon. Seconds later, a single burst of plasma lanced through the void, shattering the satellite into fragments. Marcus cursed under his breath. "They're pushing, Ilara. How long do we wait?" Ilara's expression hardened. Not yet. She watched the display with an unwavering gaze. Every moment the Kelvar ignored Titan's shield, it revealed more about their tactics, more that she could use against them when the time came. The room fell into a tense silence as the shattered remains of the satellite drifted away into the cold darkness of space. On the Kelvar flagship, Varric smirked, satisfied with the destruction. The humans had done nothing. As expected. "They lack the will to resist," he muttered. "Even their satellites are fragile." But just as he turned away, something unexpected happened. One of his officers stiffened, reading a sudden alert. "Commander, one of our vessels, Destroyer 9, is experiencing system malfunctions." Varric frowned. "Explain." The officer hesitated, tapping furiously at the holographic controls. "Their weapons are offline. Communications, unresponsive. Shields, down." Varric's eyes narrowed. "Impossible." Another officer spoke up. "Commander, the humans are interfering with our systems somehow. Destroyer 9 is." Before he could finish, the display lit up with a bright flash. One of the Kelvar destroyers suddenly drifted out of formation, its engines sputtering. It remained intact, but lifeless, caught in Earth's gravitational pull. Varric's cold demeanor cracked. How? No plasma, no missiles, nothing had been fired from Earth. Yet, somehow, one of his ships was disabled, as if by invisible hands. "Titan's shield is real," his second-in-command whispered. Varric's grip tightened around the edge of the console. "They won't catch us off guard again." Back in Lunar Command. A low hum filled the room as Titan's shield's primary systems pulsed with energy. The disablement of the Kelvar destroyer had been a warning shot, silent and efficient. Marcus exhaled, eyes wide. "It worked. We dropped that ship like a stone." Ilara nodded but remained stoic. "It's just the beginning. They won't back down over one ship." She turned to the comms officer. "Send them a message." The officer's fingers danced over the console. Moments later, Earth's final warning was transmitted to the Kelvar flagship. "Leave now, or more will fall." Ilara watched the stars beyond the screen, knowing full well what came next. Varric's pride wouldn't allow him to retreat, and humanity was ready. The counterattack. The silence that followed Earth's final warning was suffocating. Across the planet, people stared at their screens, waiting for the Kelvar's next move. Cities, once alive with noise and movement, felt unnaturally quiet. Streets were empty. Skylines dimmed. It was as if the entire world had paused, holding its breath. But deep beneath the surface, in the hidden Lunar Command Center, there was no silence. Every second counted. Dr. Ilara Grant stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the Kelvar fleet. The destroyer that Titan's shield had disabled hung lifeless, drifting slowly toward Earth's orbit like a broken toy. Yet, the rest of the fleet remained motionless. Marcus, seated nearby, tapped nervously at his console. "They're recalibrating their systems," he muttered, "trying to figure out what we did." "They'll strike back," Ilara replied without hesitation. Her tone was calm, but her hands gripped the edge of the table tightly. "It's what I'd do." She didn't need to wait long. A sudden alarm pierced the room as new energy signatures flared on the display. Marcus's screen flooded with data. "Commander Varric's ship is charging its primary weapon," Marcus reported quickly. "Several smaller ships are repositioning toward the Titan shield satellites in orbit. They're spreading out." Ilara narrowed her eyes at the display. "They're testing for weak points, preparing for a coordinated strike." One by one, the Kelvar ships formed a crescent, weapons locked on Earth. Their fleet looked like a predatory beast, circling its prey. Marcus glanced at Ilara. "Orders." For a brief moment, the weight of the decision pressed down on her. The entire planet's fate rested in the hands of a defense system that had never been fully tested. But hesitation wasn't an option. "Activate Stage 1 of Titan Shield," she ordered. A low hum echoed through the command room. Massive underground generators powered up, and across Earth, hidden turrets, orbital rail cannons, and kinetic missile platforms began to move into position. Defense satellites in high orbit realigned, locking onto the Kelvar vessels. This was no longer a game of warnings. It was war. On board the Kelvar flagship, Commander Varric watched as his targeting systems flickered, trying to focus on the defense platforms scattered across Earth's orbit. Each time they locked on, the platforms seemed to shift, as if guided by an unseen hand. "They're adapting," Varric growled. His mandibles clicked in frustration. Primitive races shouldn't have this level of technology. His second-in-command hesitated. "Commander, the humans are not attacking directly. They're forcing us to engage first." Varric's eyes narrowed. "Then we give them what they want." He raised his arm, signaling to his weapons officer. "Target the nearest platform. Fire at will." The Kelvar ship unleashed a barrage of plasma blasts. The energy surged across space, illuminating the darkness with deadly precision. The lead plasma bolt connected with one of Earth's orbital platforms, causing a brilliant explosion. But as the smoke cleared, something unexpected happened. The platforms remained shimmered, and then disappeared entirely. "What?" Varric leaned forward in disbelief. His sensors recalibrated, revealing that the platform was still intact, unharmed. A decoy. Titan Shield had deployed holographic replicas to mislead their targeting systems. Before Varric could react, bright streaks of light flashed from the real defense platforms. Railguns fired in coordinated bursts, each shot traveling at near-light speed. One Kelvar cruiser in the rear of the formation took the brunt of the attack. The kinetic rounds punched through its shields, tearing holes into its sleek hull. Moments later, the ship erupted into flames, breaking apart as secondary explosions rippled through its core. In Lunar Command, the room erupted with cheers as the Kelvar cruiser crumbled in space. Marcus pumped his fist. "Direct hit. That's one down." But Ilara's gaze remained cold and focused. "They'll adapt," she said quietly. "Varric isn't stupid. This was only the opening move." She was right. Moments later, the Kelvar ships altered their formation, shifting to a tighter wedge. Plasma shields thickened around their cores, minimizing their exposure. They weren't just testing defenses now, they were preparing for full-scale assault. "Marcus, prepare Stage 2. Activate the pulse array." Marcus's hands danced across the controls. High above Earth, 3 massive satellites began to glow, their cores spinning faster as energy built up. The pulse array was one of Titan Shield's most experimental weapons, designed not to destroy, but to disable. It emitted an electromagnetic burst strong enough to scramble electronics and fry targeting systems. "Ready," Marcus confirmed. "Fire." The satellites released a blinding pulse of energy that spread like ripples in water. It passed harmlessly over Earth, but as it reached the Kelvar fleet, sparks erupted across their ships. Lights flickered, and several vessels veered off course momentarily. "It's working," Marcus shouted. But before the celebration could begin, the flagship cut through the pulse like a knife. Varric's ship had adapted faster than the others, deploying energy-dampening shields. Ilara clenched her fists. "He's learning too quickly." On the flagship, Varric stared coldly at the disruption in his fleet. 3 smaller cruisers drifted helplessly, their systems overloaded by the pulse. He snarled, "These humans, they're more dangerous than I expected." His second-in-command looked grim. "Commander, we should consider retreating." "No," Varric's voice was sharp. "I will not allow these primitives to humiliate us." He turned to his weapons officer. "Ready the orbital disruptor. Target their command center." The officer hesitated. "Sir, that will cause significant planetary damage. Millions could die." Varric's eyes gleamed with malice. "Let them die. If they refuse to kneel, then Earth will burn. As the disruptor charged, the glow from Varric's ship painted the stars in blood-red light. The counterattack had begun. The turning point. The Kelvar flagship's disruptor cannons burned like molten suns, their energy signatures visible from Earth's surface as red streaks across the night sky. Humanity's fate balanced on the edge of a blade. In Lunar Command, the tension was suffocating. Technicians scrambled between consoles, their eyes wide with the knowledge that millions of lives now hung in the balance. Dr. Ilara Grant stood at the center of it all, her gaze locked on the holographic projection of the Kelvar fleet. The red glow intensifying around Varric's flagship was unmistakable. They were preparing to fire directly at Earth. Marcus's voice cracked with panic. "Ilara, the flagship's weapon is locking onto us. If that disruptor fires, it'll punch straight through the defense grid. Lunar Command won't survive." Ilara didn't blink. "I know." Marcus swallowed hard, lowering his voice. "We can't stop that kind of firepower. Not with what we have." For the first time since the Kelvar fleet arrived, a flicker of doubt crossed the room. People glanced at Ilara, waiting for her response. She didn't look away from the display. "That's exactly what Varric wants us to think." The room fell silent. In Earth's orbit, Titan shield defense grid, above the blue and green planet, Earth's hidden arsenal lay dormant, waiting. Defense satellites remained in position, orbiting quietly, as if they, too, anticipated the coming storm. But high above them, a new object emerged. Unseen by the Kelvar, a massive structure began to separate from the shadow of Earth's largest orbital station. It was unlike the other defense platforms. Sleek, long, and lined with glowing blue conduits that pulsed with faint energy. This was Titan Shield's hidden ace. Codename, Avalon, a battleship far larger than any known vessel humanity had produced. It drifted forward, aligning itself between Earth and the Kelvar fleet. Its hull shimmered as adaptive camouflage peeled away, revealing rows of kinetic cannons and energy lances. On the Kelvar flagship, alarms blared. Varric's eyes narrowed as the massive vessel appeared on his screen. "What is that?" he growled. His second-in-command's mandibles twitched. "Unknown, Commander. We detected no ship of that scale in human records." Varric's gaze darkened. "It's not in the records because they didn't want us to see it." He stared at Avalon's design, realizing the unsettling truth. The humans had built it in secret. Lunar Command Center. Marcus stared at the holographic projection of Avalon as it emerged. What am I looking at?" Ilara allowed herself a small smile. "Avalon. Humanity's first interstellar warship. We started building her after the Reverie incursion." Marcus's mouth opened in disbelief. "You told me Titan Shield was our best defense." "It is," Ilara replied, her eyes still on Avalon. "But defense alone isn't enough when you're facing extinction. Avalon is our counterpunch." The battleship's engines roared to life, and with a burst of energy, it propelled itself forward. Marcus's eyes flicked nervously to the disruptor readings. "Avalon's tough, but it can't stop that disruptor, Ilara. If they fire." "They won't," Ilara interrupted, "because we're going to make sure they can't." She tapped the console, bringing up Avalon's weapon systems. The battleship was armed with something the Kelvar weren't expecting: the Nemesis array. A railgun so large it could fire projectiles the size of small ships, accelerated to near light speed. It was the first weapon capable of bypassing traditional energy shields. Ilara activated the communications link to Avalon's bridge. A woman's voice crackled through the speakers. "Commander Rin Caldwell, Captain of Avalon." "Titan Command, we are locked and ready," Rin reported. "Just say the word." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "Fire the first shot. Take out their second cruiser." "Understood. Firing now." Avalon's hull vibrated as the railgun unleashed its first round. The projectile ripped through space, leaving behind a faint contrail as it screamed toward the Kelvar fleet. In less than a second, the ram struck its target, a Kelvar cruiser positioned near the flagship. The kinetic energy shattered the vessel's hull like glass, sending debris spiraling into the void. Marcus gripped his chair. Direct hit. But before the cheers could erupt, the Kelvar fleet retaliated. Plasma bolts lit the darkness as the remaining ships focused fire on Avalon. The battleship's shields flared brightly, absorbing the onslaught. "Shields are holding," Rin's voice reported calmly. "For now." On board the Kelvar flagship, Varric's mandibles clenched. So, the humans did have a hidden weapon. His officer shifted nervously. "Commander, 2 ships down. Their battleship is cutting through our cruisers." Varric's gaze flickered to the disruptor controls. "No more games. Charge the weapon. Target Avalon." The massive disruptor at the base of the Kelvar flagship roared to life, glowing crimson. Lunar Command Center. Marcus's face drained of color as readings spiked. "Ilara. They're targeting Avalon." Ilara didn't hesitate. "Signal Avalon." Full evasive maneuvers. And she took a deep breath. "Prepare Stage 3 of Titan Shield." Marcus blinked. "Stage 3. That system's not stable yet. If it backfires." "It won't." Ilara cut him off. "Because we don't have a choice." Stage 3 was the Hammer Protocol, a direct energy burst capable of disrupting every Kelvar ship's systems simultaneously. But it was risky, too much energy, and the resulting feedback could cripple Earth's entire satellite network. But there was no alternative. Ilara stared at the crimson glow building around the Kelvar flagship. The disruptor was nearly ready. "Marcus, activate Hammer Protocol." He hesitated, then nodded. Activating. Above Earth, every defense satellite synchronized, forming a web of crackling blue energy. The pulse built slowly, vibrating through the command center. 5 seconds to full charge, Marcus counted. 4, 3, 2, 1. Ilara raised her hand. Fire. The Hammer Protocol erupted in a burst of white light, flooding space with an EMP-like wave. The Kelvar fleet's plasma cannons dimmed, their shields flickered, and for a brief moment, they were vulnerable. Avalon seized the opportunity, firing 2 more rounds from the Nemesis array. Both struck the Kelvar flagship, sending shockwaves through its hull. Varric's ship lurched violently as explosions rippled across its surface. The turning point had come. Humanity's triumph. The Kelvar flagship shuddered under the weight of the Nemesis array's strike. Fires raged along its hull, and secondary explosions rippled across the vessel's core systems. Debris peeled away into the void, spinning silently through space. For the first time in centuries, the Kelvar fleet tasted vulnerability. And the realization struck like ice. On the command deck, Commander Varric gripped the railing as sparks rained down around him. His dark eyes scanned the flickering displays, each one showing more damage than the last. "How?" he muttered under his breath. The answer hung before him. Avalon. A single human battleship, standing between his armada and total domination. Varric's second-in-command limped toward him, blood trailing from a gash across his chest. "Commander," he gasped, "our disruptor is offline. Power surges are spreading across all decks. Shields are failing." Varric's mandibles tightened. He slammed his fist against the console, denting the metal. "We are Kelvar. This planet will burn before we retreat." But the words felt hollow, even as they left his mouth. On the central display, Avalon glided forward, smoke trailing from its own wounded hull. Its guns were already recharging. In Lunar Command, a wave of cheers erupted across the room as the Kelvar flagship flickered, half its weapon systems silenced. But Dr. Ilara Grant wasn't celebrating. Not yet. She stood rigid, eyes narrowed at the display. Marcus noticed her silence and approached carefully. "That's 2 direct hits to their flagship. They're falling apart," Marcus said, trying to mask the shake in his voice. "We might have actually done it. Ilara's gaze remained locked on the Kelvar fleet. No, not yet. Varric won't retreat unless he's forced to. Marcus frowned. Forced? What else can we do? Ilara's response was cold and immediate. We take the flagship out completely. Marcus's eyes widened. You're talking about full destruction. There are thousands aboard that ship. I know. Ilara's voice softened, but her resolve didn't waver. And if they survive, Earth won't. Marcus hesitated, but eventually nodded. Understood. I'll relay orders to Avalon. As Marcus moved to his console, Ilara stared at the distant planet beyond the glass. One last shot. That's all it would take to end this. Her thoughts drifted. Years of preparation. Countless hours of sacrifice. It had all come to this moment. She knew Avalon's next strike wouldn't just end a battle. It would send a message. Earth was not prey. On board Avalon, Commander Rin Caldwell sat in the warship's command chair, watching the Kelvar fleet ripple under fire. Smoke filled parts of the bridge, and damage reports scrolled endlessly across the screens. But despite the wear and tear, Avalon was still fighting. Commander, her weapons officer called out, the Nemesis array is at 70% charge. We can fire in 90 seconds. Rin exhaled. 90 seconds in a firefight felt like an eternity. Keep rotating the hull, she ordered. We can't give them a clean shot. The ship's engines groaned as Avalon shifted in space, angling slightly to keep its damaged flank away from the remaining Kelvar cruisers. On the main screen, the enemy flagship sputtered, trailing debris like blood in water. Its disruptor was silent. But Rin wasn't fooled. Varric was still alive. Target their core, Rin commanded. I want that ship gone. On the Kelvar flagship, Commander Varric watched as Avalon realigned for another shot. His second-in-command stumbled toward him, panting. Commander, if they fire again, we won't survive. Varric's grip on the railing loosened, and for the first time in his long career, the weight of defeat pressed down on him. He stared at Earth, now hidden behind Avalon's looming silhouette. They warned us, Varric said quietly, and we ignored them. He looked around the ruined command deck, the faces of his surviving officers filled with quiet dread. Open a channel to the humans, Varric finally said. His officer blinked. Sir. Do it. A moment later, the static-filled image of Dr. Ilara Grant appeared on the screen. Her face was calm, but her eyes were hard. Behind her, Lunar Command bustled with quiet urgency. This is Commander Varric of the Kelvar flagship, he began, swallowing his pride. We request a ceasefire. Ilara's expression didn't change. Your fleet crossed into our space uninvited. You destroyed our satellites. You fired on our ships. Why should we accept a ceasefire now? Varric's mandibles twitched. Because if you don't, we'll both lose more than we can afford. A long silence stretched between them. The tension was suffocating. Ilara's voice finally broke the quiet. Withdraw your fleet immediately. Leave Earth's orbit. And this ends here. Varric's eyes narrowed. And if we refuse? Ilara leaned closer, her expression deadly serious. Then Avalon fires one last shot. The threat lingered in the air. Varric knew she wasn't bluffing. After several long seconds, he gave the order. To all Kelvar ships, retreat. The surviving Kelvar vessels slowly pulled away, their engines flaring as they began to slip back into deep space. The broken flagship drifted behind them, its lights flickering as it limped from Earth's orbit. Hours later, Lunar Command. The celebration in Lunar Command was subdued. Humanity had won, but at a cost. Ilara watched the stars as the last Kelvar ships disappeared from view. Marcus approached, offering a tired smile. They're gone. For now, Ilara replied, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You don't think this is over? Ilara turned to face him. They'll return. Maybe not the Kelvar, but someone else. The galaxy knows we exist now. Marcus crossed his arms. So what do we do? Ilara's gaze hardened. We keep building. Avalon was just the beginning. As Earth rotated beneath them, humanity stood at the dawn of a new era, one where they were no longer spectators of the cosmos, but defenders of their home. A new era. The stars above Earth were quiet again. The Kelvar fleet, once an ominous shadow over the planet, was gone, retreating into the vast emptiness of space, leaving only debris and silence behind. But the echoes of the battle lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. On the ground, life slowly returned to normal. Cities reignited with light and sound, and people poured into the streets, sharing stories of the day humanity stood its ground. Across the planet, there was a collective realization. Earth had not just survived, it had changed. But in the halls of power, the weight of that transformation was already reshaping the future. Lunar Command. 1 week later, Dr. Ilara Grant stood alone in the observation deck of Lunar Command, staring down at Earth. The planet spun below her, peaceful and untouched, as if the battle had been nothing more than a fleeting storm. But Ilara knew better. She could still see it, the glow of the Kelvar disruptor cannons, the shimmer of Avalon's shields under enemy fire. The exact moment, the flagship broke apart, spilling wreckage into orbit. The fight may have ended, but the galaxy had just begun to take notice. Footsteps echoed behind her. Marcus approached, his expression lighter than it had been in days. "They're calling it the Day of Resolve," Marcus said with a faint smile. "The day we proved Earth wasn't just a backwater planet. It's all over the news." Ilara didn't turn away from the window. "People need something to celebrate." "They deserve it," Marcus replied, leaning on the railing. "We held the line, Ilara. You held the line." Ilara's eyes flickered toward Avalon, which now orbited silently above Earth like a guardian watching over its flock. The warship had been damaged but not broken, just like humanity itself. "We did," Ilara agreed. "But this isn't over." Marcus frowned. "The Kelvar are gone. We've won." "No," Ilara said softly, shaking her head. "The Kelvar retreated because they didn't expect us to fight back like this. But now they know, and so does every other race in the galaxy." Marcus's face darkened. "You think someone else will come?" "They always do." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The distant hum of Lunar Command's machinery filled the space between them. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "So, what now?" Ilara straightened, her gaze hardening. "Now we prepare." Avalon, Earth orbit. In the aftermath of the battle, Avalon had become more than just a warship. It was a symbol. Across the world, people looked up at the glowing silhouette in the night sky, drawing comfort from its presence. It was a reminder that humanity had teeth and was no longer afraid to bare them. Commander Rin Caldwell stood on Avalon's bridge, watching Earth turn below. Her crew worked diligently around her, repairing systems and reinforcing defenses. A young officer approached with a tablet in hand. "Commander, the repairs to the Nemesis array are 80% complete. Full operational status within 3 days." "Good," Rin replied. "And the Hammer Protocol satellites?" "Back online and recalibrated. Titan shield is fully restored." Rin nodded, allowing herself a small sense of relief. They had survived, but the next fight could come from anywhere. "Open a channel to Lunar Command," she ordered. Moments later, Ilara's face appeared on the holoscreen. "Commander Caldwell," Ilara greeted. "Avalon's looking sturdy." "She'll hold," Rin replied. "Barely. But if the Kelvar had stayed any longer, I'm not sure we'd be having this conversation." Ilara's gaze sharpened. "They'll be back. Or someone else will." Rin crossed her arms. "I know. And next time, they won't underestimate us." Earth. Global Defense Council. In the weeks that followed the battle, Earth's leaders convened in Geneva for a summit unlike any in human history. Representatives from every nation filled the hall. But this time, it wasn't war between nations they discussed. It was the defense of their planet. A massive holoprojection of the Kelvar fleet hovered above the council chamber, rotating slowly. Ilara stood before the gathered leaders, presenting her report. The Kelvar's technology was superior to ours, she explained. But they made one mistake. They assumed strength came only from weapons. She gestured to the image of Avalon. What saved us wasn't just firepower. It was resilience, cooperation, and the will to fight for our home. Avalon was the first step, but it can't be the last. A murmur spread across the room. Some leaders nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. The president of the European Union leaned forward. Dr. Grant, are you suggesting we expand Titan's shield beyond Earth? Ilara met his gaze. Yes, Earth needs more than just defense platforms. We need a fleet. The room fell silent. Titan's shield worked, but if another armada arrives tomorrow, we can't risk fighting from our doorstep again, Ilara continued. We need to meet them before they reach our orbit. I'm proposing the construction of a new fleet, Earth's first space navy. Gasps rippled through the chamber, but Ilara pressed on. We've already started with Avalon. But imagine 10 Avalons. 100. Ships that can defend our colonies, escort our transports, and push humanity further into the stars. Silence followed. Finally, the Secretary General of the United Nations stood. I agree with Dr. Grant. We can no longer afford to wait for the next threat. Earth will not be prey. A round of applause followed, sealing the decision that would reshape humanity's future. 1 year later, Earth's orbit was no longer quiet. Construction yards now dotted the sky, building new warships modeled after Avalon. The first of the new fleet, the UNS Resolute, glided past the moon, its hull gleaming under the sunlight. More ships followed, their engines burning bright as they prepared for maiden voyages beyond the solar system. Ilara stood on Avalon's observation deck, watching the new fleet take shape. Marcus stood beside her, grinning. I never thought I'd see the day Earth had its own navy, Marcus said, shaking his head. This is just the beginning, Ilara replied. As the Resolute vanished into the distance, Ilara's gaze drifted to the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Kelvar watched, and others waited. But now, when they looked toward Earth, they wouldn't see a vulnerable world. They would see a force rising. A new era had begun.